טוב, שלום לכולם. התנצלות קטנה שכמו שתוכנן מראש אני ארצה באנגלית. המצגת איתי באנגלית. So in this, זה אולי נראה משונה גם לי, אבל... Okay. In this presentation I'm going to present findings of a research conducted by Daniel Bartal and me, which deal with Israeli-Jewish collective memory regarding the Israeli-Arab-Palestinian conflict. In terms of setting out the theoretical background, the basic proposition is that societies involved in intractable conflicts attempt to evolve functional socio-psychological infrastructure in order to meet the enormous challenges that such conflicts present for the parties involved. This structure includes three main components. The first is the ethos of conflict, which is composed of various social beliefs like the importance of security, desire for peace, etc. The second one is collective emotional orientation, which includes various emotions which are relevant for the conflict, like hatred, fear, and anger. And lastly, it's the collective memory of conflict, which is the focus of this presentation. Collective memory, in general, is defined as representation of the past which are adopted by the collective. And it composed of two main kinds of collective memory. The first one is the official memory, which includes representation of the past which are adopted by the official institutions and representatives of the collective and can be found in formal brochures, textbooks, etc. The second one is the popular collective memory, which is representation of the past which are adopted by the public and can be found in oral accounts of people, tradition, customs, and social practices. Specifically regarding collective memory of conflicts, typically it is biased in favor of the own group and justifies the outbreak of the conflict and its cause of development. It presents the positive self-image of the group, delegitimizes the opponent, and presents their own group as a victim. Such a collective memory shapes negatively the psychological and behavioral reactions of each party towards the opponent party. Such collective memory, a biased collective memory of conflict, is functional during the climax of conflict. However, such collective memory also inhibits the escalation of the conflict, peaceful resolution, and reconciliation. Thus, the more that positive transformation of the collective memory will occur, so it will be less biased, this will contribute to peace and reconciliation. Regarding the study, this is the first study to directly examine via public opinion survey the overall Israel-Jewish popular collective memory of the conflict. And it was funded by a grant awarded to me by the IPRA, International Peace Research Foundation in the USA. With regard to the methodology, it was conducted by a nationwide representative telephone survey conducted in summer 2008 among 500 Israeli Jews. It addressed 24 major events in the conflict starting from the late 19th century until 2000. These 24 questions were of various kinds. Some of them were general, for example, who is responsible for the conflict. Some of them more specific, for example, what were the causes for the exodus of the 1948 Palestinian refugees. Some of the questions were more facts-oriented, some of them were more like attitudes. For example, what was the extent of sincerity during the peace processes or negotiations. In addition, it examines various characteristics of the interviewees, for example, socioeconomic variables, as well as other many, as will be described onwards. With regard to the findings, there are two main. The findings can be divided into two. First, the descriptives one. With regard to the descriptive aspect, we use three kinds of narratives. The first one is the extreme Jewish narrative, which generally speaking exclusively portrays Arabs and Palestinians negatively and Jews Israelis positively. The second one is a balanced one, more critical, whereas both parties are equally presented in the same manner. And the last one is extreme Arab-Palestinian narrative, which is like a mirror image of the extreme Jewish, exclusively portrays Jews, Israelis negatively and Arab-Palestinians positively. In addition, in most of the questions, two more sub-narratives were used, moderate Jewish and moderate Arab-Palestinians. For example, regarding moderate Jewish, it was not exclusively negatively Arab-Palestinian, but mostly. With regard to the findings, so the descriptive findings. So overall finding, like the average of the collective memory was found between moderate Jewish and balanced narrative, closer to the moderate Jewish one. So if you see here the spectrum of the 5 narratives, and the point of the X is where the overall collective memory was found. And this is, generally speaking, is quite a positive aspect, since the collective memory was found to be quite critical and not so close to the extreme Jewish, taking into consideration, as mentioned earlier, that the less biased the collective memory is, there is more chances for promoting peace and reconciliation. I would like to give 3 examples of this positive aspect. This question relay is the following. Which of the following sentences best describes your opinion with regard to the distribution of responsibility between Jews and Arabs, including Palestinians, for the outbreak and continuation of the Israeli-Arab conflict? So you have these 3 narratives. The first one, extreme Jewish. Arabs, including Palestinians, are primarily responsible for the outbreak of the conflict and its continuation. Second one, balanced. The Arabs and the Jews are more or less equally responsible. And the last one, the Jews are primarily responsible. As you can see, the biggest portion of the 46% holds the balanced narrative regarding such a major question. The second example is the following. To the best of your knowledge, what was the quality of the relation between the Jews and Palestinians in Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, in the centuries that preceded the beginning of the Zionist immigration to Eretz Israel in the end of the 19th century? The relations were, and here you have 5 narratives, very bad, again, according to the same order of Jewish, balanced, and Palestinian. Very bad, somewhat bad. This is the moderate Jewish, medium, somewhat good, and very good. As you can see, only the first two narratives altogether represent about 23.4%. Only such relatively small percentage of the population see these relations as bad to some extent. And the last one relates to this major issue. What were the reasons for the departure of the Palestinian refugees during the War of Independence? 3 narratives. The first one, extreme Jewish. The refugees left due to fear and calls of leaders to leave. The second one, the refugees left due to fear, calls of leaders to leave, and expulsion by the Jews. And lastly, the refugees were expelled by the Jews. So as you can see, the balanced narrative has a strong hold of almost close to the Jewish narrative. In addition, if you add the 8% of the Arab-Palestinian narrative, you reach a total of 47% who believe that the Palestinians were expelled to some extent during this war, and this is about the most central historic issue in the conflict, as was also mentioned before.
Can you repeat?
Later, okay. Sorry. To summarize the positive aspect of the descriptive finding, the collective memory was found to be critical in a significant manner. And this is surprising and encouraging regarding the Israeli Jewish society for a few reasons. First, as mentioned earlier, typically society in conflict hold a very biased, antagonistic collective memory, and this was not what was found in this study. Secondly, collective memory is usually supposed to be positively transformed after the conflict is totally resolved. In our case, as we know, we do have peace agreement with Egypt and Jordan, but this is cold peace, and with other nations, let's say, we don't have peace still, and violence is still occurring, and still we found these kind of findings. And lastly, in the past, we cannot compare the findings of this research to another one because such a study was not conducted in the past. However, it seems safe to assume that if such a study would have been conducted between the 1950s to 1970, surely the results would have been more in the direction of the extreme Jewish. And this points out to the fact that, generally speaking, globally, the Israeli Jewish society is moving in a positive direction. The main causes for the positive transformation of this collective memory cannot really discuss here in length, but briefly it can be mentioned that it can be influences of changes in the conflict, as along the years Israel became more secure in its position of ability to defend itself, changes in the society became more Americanized and globalized, changes in the media became, from the 1970s, became more decentralized, and changes also in the party in power with the change in the parties in 1977. So it would have been great if I could have finished the presentation like this in a little bit optimistic manner, but this is not the case. However, regarding various events or questions, the collective memory was found highly Jewish-oriented or biased, unrealistic. So it's a complicated, quite good, but still it's a complicated picture. Central themes of the Jewish narratives included, for example, a systematic explanation of the right of the Jews for the land. Jews Israel were positively presented and were presented also as victims of the conflict. And this impedes peace and reconciliation. Let me give you 3 examples. The first one is this question. According to the United Nations Division Resolution of 1947, what portion of Eretz Israel were the Palestinians supposed to get relative to their representation in the population? The Palestinians got, according to the resolution, option 1, a part of the land much bigger than the representation in the population, a part of the land bigger than the representation, a part of the land equal to the representation, a part of the land smaller than the representation, and much smaller. As you can see, the first 3 categories, who reach out about 60% of the population, think that the Palestinian got a part of the land which is equal or bigger than the representation. Now, this is actually inaccurate because, as we know, the Palestinian at that time, about 2/3 of the population, got only about 44% of the land. And if such people who believe so, they cannot think that maybe some of the reasons for the objections for this resolution was the extent of the land that the people got. The second example is the following. What were the reasons for the failure of the negotiation between Barak and Arafat in summer 2008? 3 narratives. The first one, Barak offered Arafat a very generous peace agreement, but Arafat declined mainly because he didn't want peace. The second one, both parties are responsible for the failure, since, for example, Barak's offer was insufficiently generous and Arafat was unwilling to make compromises. And lastly, Arafat did want peace, but Barak was not generous enough in meeting the needs of the Palestinians. And as you can see, there's a very big majority who supports the extreme Jewish narrative. And lastly, what portion of Israeli Arab, excluding those in East Jerusalem, have planned or taken part in terrorist activities against Israel since the war of independence until today? 5 narratives. The first one, almost all Israeli Arab acted like this. Most of them acted like this, about half of them, a minority of them, and an insignificant minority of them. If we take the first 3 categories, we reach about 37% who believe that half or more of Israeli Arabs took part in terror activities, and as we know, this is really not the case. It's really an insignificant part of the Israeli Arabs took part in such activities. So I will move to the second part of the finding, much shorter than the first one, the explanatory one. First, regarding the determinants of collective memory. Jewish narrative was found to be positively correlated with people who are, for example, older. For example, people who are older tend more to hold the Jewish narrative. And we have some more findings. Jewish narrative was positively correlated with people who are older and people who are more religious, politically right-wing oriented, low income, with authoritarian personality, with a high attachment to Jewish identity, low belief in possibility of transforming traits, low level of openness to new information, in addition to high level of conformism, high level of traditionalism, and high level of collective memory of persecution. A few words about this last correlation. About collective memory of persecution, we are talking about collective memory of anti-Semitism, including the Holocaust, and we found a very strong impact on this, on the collective memory. And you know, in the literature, it was in the media also, it was written a lot about how this collective memory of persecution impacts the way Israeli Jews act in the conflict, and we found strong support for this argument. In the other direction, consequences of collective memory. Jewish narrative was found to be positively correlated with people who have negative emotion towards Arabs, like hate, fear, despair, and anger, in the sense that collective memory, such narrative raises such kind of negative emotions. And lastly, the Jewish narrative was positively correlated with people who are less willing to sign peace agreements with the Palestinians and Syrians. So these findings also important, as it somewhat also presents the importance of researching collective memory in order to explore the way it operates. In conclusion, descriptively, the Israeli Jewish popular collective memory of the conflict was surprisingly found to be critical in a significant manner. However, there is still way to go, as close to 60% of the population hold Jewish extreme and moderate narratives. Together it's 60% almost. Explanatory various determinants of and consequences of collective memory were explored. And the main findings of the study can be found when you are Googling TC in collective memory, and the first option which pops up will be with the results of the findings. So thank you very much.